Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou ki tēnei hui, me te kaupapa o tēnei wā, Manaakitanga, how to set up safe, welcoming spaces when teaching sensitive topics. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Monica Kuhn. I'm one of the learning specialists on the project team for Te Pūtiaki Manatanga, and I look forward to us all learning together for the next hour. Let's start with karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, ki mā tāra ki tai. Ihi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, ti hei Māori ora. So, before we get started with the extra webinar, I just quickly want to remind everyone that this webinar is recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube with the participants' faces blurred out. We will also share the recording on our website. Now, this will allow you and anyone who couldn't make it today to come back and rewatch the session. We will also come and upload any relevant links to our website. I want to quickly acknowledge that this is a challenging time in the sector following the recent ELC decisions. I don't want to make any light of that, but for now, I would like to ask you to just park those conversations for the duration of this webinar so that we can give our wonderful presenters our full attention. We have 3 speakers here today, as you can see, from He Tohu at the National Library, Te Puna Mataranga o Aotearoa in Wellington. First up, from the right, we've got Ākonga, Kuki Airani. She is the Senior Learning Facilitator with over 30 years experience at the National Library. Anna has welcomed many visitors and she enjoys sharing the knowledge and information of the library's taonga. Next up, on the very left, we've got Christa Hopkins, who whakapapas to He Tohu, Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Tua, and Tangata Tiriti. She has been a learning facilitator at the National Library for the past 5 years. A trained secondary school teacher and a classical musician, Christa is passionate about the ways we connect and share stories. And in the middle, we've got the lovely Tanja McArthur, who is, like me, originally from Germany. She completed her PhD at Victoria University about biculturalism at Te Papa. She loves her role as learning facilitator at the National Library because she can utilize her previous work experience at the Waitangi Tribunal and her passion for educating people about New Zealand's history. Now, it's a real super pleasure to have these 3 ladies today here presenting. And I'm sure you will have many questions for them. So as usual, please put them in the chat for now, and we will try to address them at the end of the session. Now, time permitting, we will all get a chance to contribute to a collaborative Padlet after the initial presentation. But now it's time for me to hand over to our friends from He Tohu. Kia ora.
Kia ora ana tātou kātoa, ko Kuki Airani ahau, ko Manaakitanga tōku ingoa, kai tohu mātua. Hi everyone, I'm from the beautiful islands of the Cook Islands. My name is Manaakitanga and I am Senior Learning Facilitator. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, no tia mana ahau ko Tanja McArthur tōku ingoa. Guten Tag, my name is Tanja. I'm from Germany originally and I've worked at National Library for 3 years now.
Kia ora koutou, ko Christa Hopkinson tōku ingoa. He area hau no He Tohu, Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Tua. Hi, my name is Christa. I am Māori and Pākehā and I have worked at the National Library since 2016.
And this is actually how we introduce ourselves to visitors, placing emphasis on our diverse team. We bring different perspectives and connections to the documents as tangata whenua, tangata tiriti, and tangata o te moana nui a kiwa. The second person from the left on our photo is Zoe Rowland, our Public Programs Manager. And I think Zoe's watching right now, so I acknowledge the work she does behind the scenes to make us thrive. Tēnā koe, Zoe. Next slide.
The National Library, like many other museums and institutions, can look quite intimidating to students coming in for the first time. How can we manaaki them in a way that puts them at ease, relaxes them, makes them feel welcome, and that they are in a safe space for learning and sharing their thoughts? Our building has a very interesting shape. I have had many people comment on whether they were allowed to enter. Our front doors are see-through doors and you can't see in from the outside, Our manuhiri walk slowly or creep up to the doors and see whether the doors will open. Today, we will talk about Manaakitanga, how to set up safe, welcoming spaces when teaching sensitive topics. We see our role as learning facilitators as keeping the children safe, keeping our taonga safe, and keeping ourselves safe. We will now share with you some of the tools that we find useful for teaching in our He Tohu exhibition. Next.
He Tohu means the signs or the marks and holds 3 documents that have shaped our nation. They are He Whakaputanga o te Rangatiratanga o New Tirinei, the Declaration of Independence from 1835, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi from 1840, and Te Petihana Whakamanapoti Wahine, the women's suffrage petition from 1893. These are enclosed in our document room, He Whakapapa Kōrero, with digital interactives around the outside space. He Tohu was created through a Crown Iwi partnership and opened 5 years ago in May 2017. These documents were previously kept at Archives New Zealand, who are the kaipupuri, the caretakers of government records. This is an Archives New Zealand exhibition housed within the National Library. There are actions that we want to uphold the mana of the documents, advocating for tangata whenua, educating about rangatiratanga, and advocating for the relationship that was envisaged in Te Tiriti and should be aspired to in Crown Māori relationships.
So the purpose and the content of our tours of He Tohu is to educate people about the importance, especially of the Declaration of Independence and Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We talk about complex ideas and sensitive topics, such as Māori sovereignty, tino rangatiratanga, the mistranslation of the treaty, the promises of Te Tiriti being broken, Māori being colonized and marginalized, the Waitangi sheet being eaten by rats. It is often new information for visitors, and it can be confronting and triggering many emotions. In the exhibition are infographics showing Māori land loss and how quickly the Māori population decreased. We talk about inequality and injustice. So we need to prepare students to be open to the new information and to be empathetic. But museums and libraries should be places where we talk about sensitive topics, as they can be contact zones. The term contact zone was first used by Mary Louise Pratt, who defined the contact zone as the social spaces where cultures meet, clash, and grapple with each other. The concept was later expanded by anthropologist James Clifford as, quote, the space of colonial encounters, the space in which peoples geographically and historically separated come into contact with each other and establish ongoing relations, unquote. Exhibitions are also, and that's a quote from museum consultant Elaine Human-Gurian, safe spaces for unsafe ideas. And so when we put this presentation together, we struggled a bit with the overall question, how do we create safe spaces? Because we do it every day, but most of it we do intuitively and it becomes second nature. But it was a really good process for us to actually sit down and analyze what we do. And that's when we realized just what an amazing job we're all doing as educators. And I'm sure you'll find the same if you sit down and reflect. So I encourage you to do a reflection on practice and writing it down, as it's really valuable and will boost your confidence. So setting up the space. Think about your teaching space. Is it welcoming? Are there comfortable chairs, maybe beanbags? Or if the students are sitting on the floor, can you make it special with mats or cushions? At the National Library, since COVID, we do a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation and then let groups self-guide through the exhibition before we come back for a feedback round. The students sit in a circle with us learning facilitators also sitting down. And that way we are on the same level as them. It democratizes the experience and diffuses the power relationship of educators and students. And this photo is actually from the co-design process of our Precious exhibition. We didn't have a photo of our actual teaching space, which is another thing you'll probably find that you don't photograph your everyday. So here we are in the gallery space. Usually we set up outside a He Tohu exhibition, but you get the idea. It should be a welcoming, safe space.
Orientation of the building, evacuation procedures, and the health and safety help everyone feel safe and settle into the space. Prior to a school visit, we send out our RAMS form and our expectations and guidelines document. This includes if any student are hearing or visually impaired. Manaakitanga starts with your first correspondence, whether it be an email or a phone call. It is very important we share this information to our manuhiri and especially to our tamariki on arrival. It sets the scene that they know what to do in emergencies and they are in safe hands because they are in one of the safest buildings in Wellington. This is also a good time for our team to scan the group to see if anyone needs any extra assistance. Next.
He Tohu is a space for all New Zealanders. These documents have shaped the fabric of our country, and in order to make sure they are around for as long as possible, we have extra guidelines and tikanga that we follow in the space. As direct connections to our tupuna, our ancestors, the exhibition is a tapu space. We will often start by asking students about how we behave in tapu areas. Whilst we have a range of behaviour management tools in our own kete, the role of behaviour management sits with the visiting teachers. We emphasise this expectation in communications prior to the visit and in the clipboards we give them during their visit. This covers the documents Anna covered previously in case the teachers need a refresher once they arrive for their visit. Through our expectations, we are trying to set up the physical, emotional, and spiritual safety for our learners and ourselves. You may have noticed that in our health and safety information, we also have these fun icons. These can be found in PowerPoint, and we find them helpful for engaging students in their visit preparation.
So one of the tools we use is indigenizing the space. We're located in Wellington, and the land that National Library sits on was part of Pipitea Pa. So we acknowledge that at the start of our programs. Where's your organization located? What's the connection to Mana Whenua? Is there a story you can share to raise awareness of Indigenous landmarks and people? We're very fortunate at the National Library to have this beautiful mural by Cliff Whiting. And that's where, prior to COVID, we started our tours right in front of Te Wehinga. We asked the students, do you think this is a Māori story? They all nod their heads. What story is depicted here? It usually takes a few guesses and we hear Maui and other suggestions, and then they go like, oh, it's the separation of Papatuanuku and Ranginui. And then we tell that purako, that story, and mention the darkness that the children were in and how they wanted to get out and discover. And this tunes the students into looking at the world through a Māori lens. Students familiar with the story will often contribute to the narrative and share their knowledge. Māori students in the group feel acknowledged and a sense of belonging. And it opens students up to a different worldview, Te Ao Māori. Sometimes we also do a little activity here. Imagine a scale where 10 is, I know everything about the Treaty of Waitangi, and 0 is, I know nothing. Stand where you feel you are with your knowledge of the treaty right now. Then we ask why they position themselves where they stand. Most students and adults choose low numbers between 2 and 6. It's self-evaluation and gives the ones who think they don't know much a bit of relief and affirmation. You're not alone. It's okay to admit not knowing much, and we can all learn together. At the end, we tell them that we learning facilitators wouldn't pick 10 either, because even though we know a lot, we always learn more through the visitors sharing their stories and perspectives. And stating that makes us less the experts and more facilitators who help you learn and learn alongside you. We're building connections.
A great tool or skill is humour, making them laugh or feeling relaxed. And we talk a lot about tāwhiri mātia. We often say, this atua lives in Wellington. Do you agree? That's tāwhiri mātia, atua of wind. This brother didn't want his parents separated. He wanted them to stay together as a whānau, and he is still angry today when he thrashes the country with wind and storm, just like we've seen in Wellington over the last few days. The response may be that no one laughs at our jokes. Hey, it's okay. It may not work with every group, but we have a lot of fun, and as well, we help our visitors learn and understand. I've got a bit of a story. So we had a visit from Te Kura Waikare Moana in 2020, and we shared the story of Tōwenga. We went through each atua and asked the kids to name them. Who is this atua? He lives in Wellington, and his name starts with T. The kids shouted out, Tamati Coffee. Little did we know that they were meeting him at Parliament after their visit to the library. Everyone was just in fits of laughter, and I think we didn't end up finishing the story. Next.
So another tool we use to set the scene for learning is that we talk about this beautiful carving or pattern on the wall of the outside of the document room. And here we ask the students, what do you see in these patterns? What does it remind you of? There are no right or wrong answers. And that, just stating that actually helps that they put a hand up or yell out what they think. And the answers are varied. They go from waves, tree, fingers, roots, harakeke, scratches, fabric, wrinkles, sand dunes, hills and valleys, and the list goes on. So once the students have finished sharing their ideas, we say, it's interesting, we all see different things, but we can also relate to what other people are seeing in the patterns. We often see things that are familiar to us from our natural environment. And it's similar when we look back at history. We all have our own interpretations and perspectives based on the stories we've been told. But this is also a safe space to share our different perspectives, see it from someone else's perspective and learn from each other. And that often brings up great conversations. The designers of the document room actually modeled a pattern on ripples on the water because they wanted to say that all three documents had a ripple effect on New Zealand society and have changed how we live together. So not every institution has the luxury of having a sculpture like we do. And we thought about other ways of perhaps setting the scene for learning and cutting through that resistance that some people bring with them. And this image here shows the wave, which is a teaching tool for minimizing resistance. And you can find it on the Ako Aotearoa website. So here we see different people viewing and experiencing a wave from different angles, and that would really influence how you see it as being dangerous or beautiful or small or big, because you have different viewpoints. So this tool provides a reliable, easy to deliver, easy to understand, easy to remember learning experience that highlights two main ideas. Everyone has knowledge, people have different kinds of knowledge from different viewpoints, and individuals and groups have different realities.
The document room is pretty dark to protect the documents from fading in the light. We find that the low light levels help the students use other senses, such as touching the walls and focusing on listening. It's a bit like being in a cocoon, and interestingly, the intimate atmosphere and being able to hide in the dark makes the shy students more confident and comfortable to ask questions. Is there a contained dark space in your organisation that you could use for teaching? Maybe a whare, a star dome, or a cave? As the document room is a low stimulation space, this change in environment will often evoke a sense of calmness for visitors, especially for neurodivergent students and those who may be overstimulated or nervous coming into our building. We often see change happening for students at this point of their visit. Whether tangata whenua or tangata tiriti, being the presence of the document is a powerful experience. Still a powerful experience for us too every time we enter. We also find our approach changes in this space too. We may lower our voice, change to a quieter tone, or speak slower, allowing time and space for the emotions that bubble to the surface for our visitors. Next.
One thing that we do with the students is that when walking into the document room, we ask them to put their left hand on the wall and feel around the wood and the curves taking in the room, gathering together in the middle and asking them, what do you see? What do you feel? The room has a calming effect and the wairoa is so powerful. We structure our tour chronologically, but notice that when we move on from Te Tiriti, which feels quite heavy, to the women's suffrage petition, the mood lifts and everyone exhales. Finally, something a bit more light-hearted that we can be proud of. When teaching sensitive topics, think of ways to finish on a lighter note. Another story. So we had a group visit from Palmerston North. Now these were troubled youth, rangatahi, who are not comfortable in classroom settings or in society. They came on a Tupuna Foundation program. Their kaiako said one girl never spoke up in class, but when they were in the document room, she'd led their waiata and asked, how do you get a job here? Waiata in the document room way to honour our tupuna ancestors who signed emotional release. It's really powerful.
When we cover the content of Te Tiritia Waitangi, we make sure we add equal emphasis on the fourth article, the freedom of religious expression. It's the article that allows us to practice whichever faith we wish in this country, and it's one of the reasons we have no official state church. It's also a way of acknowledging our varied backgrounds and giving permission to visitors to bring their full selves to the experience. We know that learning happens when we feel comfortable to express ourselves and can make connections with our own lives. We have wai whakanoa at the exits of the document room. Wai meaning water, and whakanoa is to become normal. It is to transition from the tapu, the sacred, back to the noa or the normal. Pre-COVID, these bowls are filled with water for visitors to transition back to the noa.
And we also like to talk about Manaakitanga. Sometimes we have kura who have come a long way and stay at National Library for most part of the day. We welcome these groups with a mihi whakatau, provide kai and a room that they can use to hang out. This is all part of Manaakitanga hospitality. For other groups, it may be that they need a snack before they can start or use the wharepaku. When a group comes through the door, we assess them quickly, almost like a triage at a hospital. How can we accommodate their needs? What injuries do they bring with them? How can we treat them and make them better? And here's another story from only 2 weeks ago. When we had a kura kaupapa visit, we could really feel their mamae, their hurt when entering the document room. And there were a few tears even. We sensed that they needed time without us. So we left the document room and held their space so no other visitors could go in. After a little while, we heard karakia and powerful haka. It certainly was a spiritual and healing experience for them. Sometimes our roles require us to step in, and other times it's about knowing when to get out of the way and making space for others. The students may not remember all the learning and all the detail we tell them, but they will remember how we made them feel, the manaki, the aroha, how well they were looked after. And since we're doing the feedback round, we've actually found that this is quite a transformational experience for the students as well, or we can see that they leave in a different mood, in a different space than when they arrived and came through the door, because we've made that connection with them. So at the end of our program, when we come back together where we started, we asked the students and their teachers, just share one thing that you've learned. And this is also an opportunity to ask questions that they may have. And sometimes things come up for the students that they actually feel they need to share. So there was one group and they had come on a very long bus trip. They were tired, didn't feel very engaged at the start, to the point where some looked very disinterested. And one boy who hadn't said anything before and whose body language suggested he would rather be elsewhere, piped up in the feedback round. How come we aren't told the real story behind the Treaty of Waitangi? And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He answered, I don't want to sound racist, but white people pretty much wiped out 50% of the Māori population. why is nobody talking about that? And I said, it's a very good question. I think these are very hard conversations that bring up many emotions like anger, sadness, grief, and shame. And many people are not ready yet to take these hard conversations. But your generation learns about it, and you can be the ones talking about it. And when we debriefed afterwards, we felt really honored that this boy, who was a year 9, felt safe to ask this question. The visit to He Tohu had obviously stirred up a lot of thinking for him. And we always hope that the conversations doesn't stop when visitors leave the building. We want to be the appetizer to continue the discussion over the main course.
Before talking about how we take care of ourselves, I want to acknowledge the privilege that we have as being part of a team. Our work is emotionally taxing, and I want to acknowledge those of you who might feel isolated or overwhelmed working in this field, and acknowledge the role of groups such as Te Pūtaiaki Mana Taonga in supporting the relationships we need to thrive. During the webinar on the 26th of May, Te Reora from He Tohu Tāmaki touched on the topic of wellbeing, and it's such an important one to cover. In order to take care of others, we have to also take care of ourselves. We regularly check in with how we are feeling before, during, and after a session. The emotions that we experience can impact and influence how we are feeling. So here are some questions we might ask ourselves during the day. How do I feel before I got to work? Or before starting with this group? How am I feeling in this moment? Am I holding on to any emotions or experiences after finishing with the group? And if so, what do I need in this moment? It could be a walk, a chat, or maybe some chocolate. This will look differently for everyone. Sometimes we might have back-to-back bookings, and on those days, they are the ones I make a concentrated effort to check in with myself. Anna, Tanja, and I have worked closely together for the last few years, and as such, we can read each other's body language and know when the other is struggling. Where we can, we like to have 2 learning facilitators per group to help share the emotional burden. If one of us is having a hard time, we rally around each other and support in the best way we can and check in on what each other needs in that moment. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening, and we hope this has been a valuable experience for you. We'll now hand back over to Monica.
Thank you so much, Christa, Anna, and Tanja. That has been super interesting and informative. And I speak from the experience of teaching difficult histories myself, and there's many, many things that I will want to go back and have another really good think about it. Now we will go to questions shortly. But in the meantime, I have on the screen here, or Mel has put on the screen here, the link to our Padlet. There is a QR code on the screen. So if you've got a mobile device there, you can scan that. In the chat, you can find the address. Now on that Padlet, we have 3 questions. The 3 questions that Anna, Tanja, and Christa talked about. The well-being of our ākonga, the well-being of our Taonga spaces and stories, and the well-being of ourselves, and how we look after these different aspects of well-being. We heard what Christa, Anna, and Tanja are doing at He Tohu. Now we would love to hear from you. What do you do to look after the well-being of your ākonga? What do you do to look after the well-being of your stories, your spaces, and your Taonga? And how do you look after your own well-being? For those of you that are new to a Padlet, you can literally just double click anywhere on that screen. In fact, I'm going to do that on my own screen. When you do that, you get a little sticky note pop up, and you can type in there. Can see one already. Somebody has said take time out in nature, fresh air, a walk outside. So that's one of the ways of how someone is taking care of themselves, I assume. There's some good ideas coming up already about how we're looking after ourselves. Oh, I like breathing exercises. I don't know if any of you have ever tried at the, we'll come back to me, the Go Noodle platform. That is a way where you can find all sorts of kids activities, little video clips, but there's also some breathing and relaxation activities up on there. So if you're ever stuck for ideas, you can have a look at that. Now, some of these could be falling under several spaces. If you want to go and connect them, you can just click on the 3 dots and then select connect to a post, and you can connect to more than one if you wish. We've got lots of ways of looking after all these 3 aspects. Fabulous. Cool. I can see some more of the connections come up on here as well. Now, this paper will stay live. So if you can't think of one of your really important techniques right now, and it comes to you later, tomorrow or some time, you can always come back to it and add it in. Somebody else, Tanja, whakanoa. Yes, that is awesome. Now, I'm thinking, Christa, Anna, and Tanja, we should probably go and add yours on there as well, maybe later, you know, after the session. That would be really cool, because I love your use of humor. I love your use of, you know, leading, but also leaving the spaces when it is the right time to do the observing of what kids need. Helen, did you see any other questions? I think Ricky had a comment earlier.
Yeah, he had a really nice idea about sprinkling lavender oil into the space before the groups arrive. It says it's got a nice calming scent. I thought that was really interesting.
That's a great idea. I don't know if that happens to other people as well, but sometimes certain exhibition spaces have sometimes a really pleasant smell. For example, if there's lots of wood in there, even the smell can be part of the experience. I am so thankful, Anna, Tanja, and Christa, that you've taken time out of your really busy schedule to share your thoughts and ideas with us. And it's been a real privilege to be sitting with you when we had a planning meeting and hear you talk about how you've reflected on your practice and preparation for that. So it's really cool that you're sharing this with us. And Helen just has a good question that is really relevant. Helen was just saying here, what advice would you give to someone who's nervous about teaching a sensitive topic? Don't know who of you would like to answer that.
I'm happy to jump in and start us off. I'd tell them that it's okay. It's absolutely okay to be nervous. You know, we all have to start somewhere, and sometimes that emotion is just our starting point for where our learning can take us. And it's, I guess, in a way, when you acknowledge that you're nervous, you're actually acknowledging sort of your starting point, where you are at and where you're feeling. And that's a great thing, because that's a springboard that we can go to develop from there.
Add to that, that it's important, especially when you're starting out, to get your facts right and, you know, make sure you practice and have the review and the feedback from your colleagues, so you really have your wording in a way that you're comfortable delivering the sensitive topic. And sometimes it's rephrasing it until it sits well with others and might not trigger so much emotion. So yeah, it's a real balance, but lots and lots of practice.
That's great. Thank you, Tanja. And lots of practice and lots of reflection, I suppose, as well, because I suppose even when we've practiced many times, sometimes we get into different situations where all of a sudden we have to change tack. Now, there's a really good follow-on question here from our lovely colleagues at the Sargent Gallery. What are some of your techniques that you use if you're needing to diffuse a situation or a discussion in a session? You know, when things are about to get out of hand, what techniques do you use then?
I might talk to that. We have security on the floor. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
You know, every group is different, and I think Tanja, Christa, and I have a great way of sensing that early. Yeah, we've had a few groups and a few people come into the space that don't really want to be there, but especially asking really really horrible questions and actually putting us on the spot as well. I think one time we just we just say to them, look, could we just talk to you on the side? Instead of akama, in terms of embarrassing them in the front of the whole group, it's just taking them aside and saying, hey, can I talk to you later? And then I'll finish my tour. And it's just having a conversation, really. And I think it all just comes down to the lack of understanding. But you want to support this person as well in terms of their learning. So yeah, if that doesn't work, then security, help. No. Yeah, I mean, every person's different. We don't know what people bring into the space. And for us, 5 years doing this, we've picked up so much skills and so much, we've got so much experience too that we know how to handle, but you just support each other and do the best you can, because at the end of the day, they go home. Hopefully they come back, because hopefully. But yeah, I don't know if Christa or Tanja want to add to that, but yeah, sometimes we get a few people that put us in awkward positions sometimes. Yeah.
And it's not something you can learn out of a book. It comes with being sensitive to the situation, observing it, trying to make the right judgment call at the time, and then reflecting with your colleagues and to go forward, isn't it? Yeah. I am just reminded of the webinar a few weeks back when our colleagues Ricky, Tereora and Imogen talked about some of the emotions that are attached to that. And one of the things I'm really reminded of is this acknowledging of emotions, that these topics are topics that are going to stir up emotions. And if we were to ignore that fact, we would do it no justice. But by acknowledging the emotions and expressing them, we can help people get to a point where they are more open for maybe the different perspectives that are around it. Now, just out of interest, and Helen has just put this in there, but what's the most rewarding part of your work? That's really a question I'm really curious about. What's the things that you go like, wow, that was so cool?
So for me, it's those light bulb moments, and we quite often have them inside the document room where people just go like, oh wow, I had no idea, and it was eaten by rats or something, like, for the first time they make that connection, and it's so rewarding to just witness it. And we have lots of those little moments. And then when people actually offer as a koha waiata at the end, however good or wonky that might be, but it's just the joy of hearing that, and people wanting to thank us and tupuna who've signed the documents in that way. I find it really rewarding.
I'm going to jump in. I was thinking, what I find most rewarding is actually just playing a role in people's lives and the journey that they're taking, looking at, what they brought initially and what they've been able to develop and learn over the course of their stay at the National Library, and being able to bring that back. We often hear feedback from people who've come multiple times saying, I love coming here, I love bringing my friends, I love bringing my family in, and it's really rewarding to be able to hear that you've been able to make that difference for them in their lives. And
I think for me is that when our manuhiri come into the space, or our students, it's that sharing their own stories with us, trusting us to share what's happened to their whānau in the past. And that's what we've really missed because of COVID, is that we're not able to go with the groups into the exhibition. But I love to hear stories. We might not even finish our tour, but listening to people's stories is the most rewarding thing, but also being able to work with these 3 documents as well. These tupuna help us do our jobs, I think. Yeah, this is more than a job.
I can completely relate to that. That is, all the points that you have raised, I can feel like, that makes a difference to you know, the workbook can sometimes be really taxing, not just on an emotional level, also a physical level, you know, taking kids around. And I can hear from your conversations that the student reflection has played an important part in there. And so that's just my personal plea to everybody out there. Make sure that you give students a chance to reflect, you know, that they can look back at what Anna, Christa, and Tanja have talked about. You know, how do they feel about something at this point in time? Not just you as educators, which is super, super important, but also the kids. How do they feel about it at the end? And how about the adults? Because we find in our work quite often, I think I can speak for all of us, that the way kids relate to some of the content on some of the stories we're talking about can be quite different to the adults and maybe the grandparents in the family due to their different upbringings and the different kind of education they've had.
I just want to say, I'm going to do a bit of a fangirling situation here as well while I've got the mic, because I've learned so much from you. I've been busy scribbling notes from your presentation, and I really like that spectrum of understanding on how you let students feel at ease by not putting yourself as a 10 right from the get-go. I love that. And I love the way that you use the ripples on the wall as a metaphor for different perspectives. That's just absolute gold. I think that's amazing. I love how you talk about low stimulation spaces and changes in the tone of your voice when you're talking. And like, it's all such, fine details. It's like a subtle craft or art in the way that you teach. It's just amazing. So many things, I could go on and on. And I really like that thing that we need to remember, that students will remember how they felt, even if they didn't remember everything you were teaching in terms of the learning points, but they will remember how they felt. So that was really cool. But yeah, I just wanted to ask you about the tapu, the notion of tapu, and how that you introduced that right at the beginning as a tapu space. And I just want to know about like the level of understanding within students around that term, or whether you need to unpack it for them, or do they sort of understand what you're saying when you say that?
I think it kind of depends on the situation, and it depends on their upbringing. So, for example, if we were to have like a Catholic school come in, they are often very, very aware of what happens in, you know, sacred spaces. They can sort of apply it to their lives. For others, it may be that we have to talk about what would you do as something that was sacred, that was really important to you. How would you behave around those sorts of things? So sometimes we'll unpack it, sometimes we won't necessarily go into too much detail, but we will always be sort of talking about what is it that you do, because the thing is that if students do misbehave, it's like, remember we're in a tapu space? We spoke about that right at the very beginning. So it means that we can bring it right around again.
And I noticed, sorry, as a follow-up question, I noticed that, you know, you have your whakanoa bowl, which when it's not COVID times has water in it. Do you sort of mention that, or is that just sort of quietly in the space? Is that something that you kind of allude to at the end of your sessions, or?
So the whakanoa bowl we introduce just before we exit the document room, and we say as we leave the tapu space and go back into the normal world, there's this water bowl where you can sprinkle yourself to help that process and that transition. And some are familiar with it and others are not. And sometimes it can be a bit messy because kids splash their friends as well. But I think they get a general idea, and it helps them make that transition. So it's valuable learning for the ones who don't know about it.
I might just add one more thing, and it's about respect as well. Being respectful in the space, but also respecting the documents that are in the document room as well. And then almost suddenly, then they know how to behave in the space as well.
Yeah. And I think that's a good comment, Monica, about indigenizing the programs. And I really appreciated how you talked about indigenizing your learning space at the beginning as well, and using that amazing mural was really great. And a good thing, I'm sure lots of people do make those references no matter where they are in the country about tangata whenua and where their place stands, but it's a really good thing to reflect on. And I really, sorry, I keep talking, I'll shut up in a minute, but I really love what you said at the beginning about how this process of presenting has helped you to reflect on your own practice and make you realize, you know, all the tools that you've got in your kite for when you teach, and all of the different ways that you provide spaces safe spaces for students. So yeah, I thought that was really great, and I encourage other people to do that. And if anybody's out there thinking, oh, maybe I could do a webinar, please do get in touch and tell us. We'd welcome you.
Yes, we absolutely do. We love hearing from everybody in the sector about all the beautiful mahi you're doing. And, what you just talked about earlier, Christa, when you said, sometimes the kids have a concept of tapu, and you mentioned maybe kids who go to a Catholic school, who go to Catholic church, they understand sacred spaces in their own context. It goes back to what other speakers have talked about too, is, getting to know our learners, make this connection with the class, at least with the class teacher beforehand, and getting an understanding of what we might expect, but also this cunning ability to scan the room and change tack if we have to. I've heard an educator use the library as a quiet space, as an example of when you go into an exhibition. It's a bit like going in the library. We're lowering our voices, and that worked for her in that context because she had that connection with the teachers beforehand, and she knew that the kids enjoyed going to the library, so she could relate to that. If she wouldn't have known that, if she would have just done a one-size-fits-all, she might have missed that really important connection. And it's really cool to see how that is another little tool in your kite. So we're looking at our next webinar, and the next webinar will not be next week, it will be the week after on Thursday the 30th, because we have Matariki next week on Friday. And we wanted to make sure you all got your long weekend in and didn't have to stay on to listen to our webinar. So it's on the 30th instead. Please do make sure you join us again to hear from Kelsey Hankins, Angie Dent, and Amy Shoebridge when they present on accessibility and disability for schools, about their experiences from a pilot internship program at Hastings City Art Gallery for students from Kōwhai Special School. Will be a real treat. I can promise you that. Before we close, I want to say, thank you so much. Vielen Dank for your time and all your beautiful mahi that you shared with us. I want to thank everybody who's come along today and shared in the Padlet. That is so awesome to see all this working together and making sure that our practice is continuing to get ever better across the sector. Thank you so much. This will not only help us as we are teaching around Aotearoa New Zealand's histories, it will help us with any topic, and especially those that are a little bit more sensitive. Now, if any of you would like to revisit this or any of our other webinars, the recordings are on the website. Mel is super speedy with these, often manages to get them up the day after, so you might see them tomorrow. Otherwise, come back to the website next week. For now, it's time for me to thank you all for coming, and we will finish with karakia. Ono hia, ono hia. Ono hia ki te uru tapunui. Kia wātea, kia mama, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairoa i te ara takata. Ka rā I rongo, whakairia ake ki runga. Kia tina, tina. Oie, taiki e. Thank you, everyone, again. Please flick any requests for topics or any offers to present through to mel.thompson@tptmt.com. All the best and see you in a fortnight. Hei kona.